What do you do? What do you do? What's happening? What's up? So I want to talk about Psalm 2:8 because I was thinking about Luke 4:5, and I'm like, that sounds vaguely familiar. Now, if you go to one of my videos from a few months ago called "Save Yourself," and we back in Matthew 4, Luke 4, when he tested in the wilderness, and when he's tested in the wilderness, he basically the Diablo quotes Psalm 91 that the Messiah, his angels would protect lest he dash his feet against any stone. So basically, what I'm trying to say in that video is that when all the people had surrounded the crucifixion and they said, "Get yourself down up off there, Messiah. You know, if you're the chosen one," and he didn't. It's similar. There's a movie starring, I think, William Dafoe, who made that, Scorsese or something, called The Last Temptation of Christ. And the last temptation of Christ was to simply not die. And that's essentially what they was trying to tell him in that Luke 23 or whatever, get down off your cross and save yourself. And this is essentially what the devil was telling him to save himself. And what he said? He said, "Thou shalt not tempt God." And the reason for that is because the devil had told him to jump up off there, so he would be the initiator, Jesus himself, of this test, by jumping just to prove some sign or to validate that he is the fulfillment of the scripture, just as a proof, when really, if you think about the bread in the wilderness, because he was hungry, it's really about faith. So you don't need to have that proof to be saved. Like, he wouldn't need that proof as a man, and as a man is very important, because this is something that John had difficulty with. John, when he wrote the gospel according to John, did not include the trial in the wilderness, probably because James was written by this point, and James said you can't tempt God. So the Christology was building, and the deification and all that. So he clearly thought you can't test God, but that's more than that. That's what I'm going to get into this video. And you can see this being true in other ways, like where something that other gospel writers had struggled a lot with was the baptism. How does somebody lesser than God baptize God and things like that? Or why would he need to, even without having original sin and whatnot? So there are other things that John doesn't have in there, and there's probably reasons for each one of them. But just like in the wilderness, and this video is going to get a lot into John 6, but in the wilderness, they did not trust God. That's why so many had died, because this is what the devil's telling him: when you out in the wilderness, why don't you get you some bread if you can do all these signs and wonders, and you won't be so hungry. And he say, you should not live by bread alone, but every word that proceeds. And bread and manna and all this had been intricately tied in the Old Testament too. I mean, it isn't a New Testament thing specifically. So I was listening to Luke 4, and lo and behold, I saw another parallel. And that's the name of the video, Psalm 2:8, Luke 4:5. Because I was thinking about Luke 4:5, and I was like, the devil said he'll give all the nations inheritance. And we got to go back to, let's say, I think it was John 18, where Peter had cut off the ear of the high priest's guard or whatever, that Jesus had to tell him, put your sword back in the sheath, and had to restore that man to a whole position. And for this reason, it's not clear how much Peter knew at what time. Now, if we go to John 20, which could be my favorite chapter in the whole Bible. I probably messed this up. I'm probably thinking of John 21. Let me see. Nice. Yeah, I'm thinking of John 21. I really like John 20, but I like John 21 too. So John 20, 21 are my favorite two chapters, maybe. All right, so John 21:18. He's talking to Peter. He said, "Most assuredly I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you where you do not wish." So I'm not going to believe that Peter had some full understanding this whole time. Jesus clearly told him, when you come to faith, bring your brothers. And remember when Jesus told him he had to die, he said, this can't be, say it ain't so. And he had to treat him just like the devil, and that's very, very, very significant. And remember, Peter grabbed his knife, like I just said, and Jesus, after that fact, said, his kingdom's not in the world. They would want. So Peter would have done what Jesus told him to do because he was a follower of Jesus, but he did not understand the death, burial, and resurrection and all the implications. So in Acts 1:6, and this is the dividing line between Michael Brown and I, and we'll move on from there until he can meet me here. He believes that Peter had full understanding of what the kingdom implied. And I'm not saying that even if he did know the entire Old Testament, that he wouldn't know, but there's so much mystery. So even if he did know the whole Old Testament, he wouldn't really, he'd know, because there's just stuff that, yes, the words are there. He did come in the fulfillment of the book, but he came in a way that you wouldn't expect, and it takes a lot of understanding to get there. Because he was the Lamb. They were thinking he was going to be the Messiah, the King, like David. But here he was, poured out like Absalom. And Peter didn't want that. Peter had an idea from the Old Testament. I mean, if you go to Isaiah, it's full of this. The tent's going to spread out to the east, north, west, south, and they're going to inherit all the nations, and the kings and queens will give them suckle. And, this is why they have 70 in their Sanhedrin, because there's 70 nations. They want to inherit the nations. That's always been it. It's about ascendancy. It's about they are going to rule the nations just as God rules the lower gods. That's after having it rolled up like a scroll. They end up having an earth, as Jesus said, because in the old pantheon there were these other gods, but they believed their God was the supreme God, and they were the supreme people. So when you go to Psalm 82, it talks about this parallel and how they need to rise up the way that Yah had risen up, and then they can inherit all the nations. or the way that Yah was going to rise up or whatever. So, but not only that, but ascending to, especially after the influence of the Persians and Greeks, to ascend into basically a heavenly realm or something, the world to come, and Jesus talked about this, where they were the 12 disciples were going to ascend to heaven to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. And that's where I don't know if Paul is one of the 12 tribes, because Paul maybe does judge Benjamin or something, but he was the apostle to the Gentiles. So whatever he's going to judge them by is not going to be necessarily the same. But I don't know if what this really has to do with God's plan or not, because Jesus had already left the scene by the time Peter decided to stay in Jerusalem, and when he said, just tarry here a little while. And then he made some deal with Paul that he was just going to go to the circumcision and Paul was going to go to the uncircumcision. When did Jesus say that? Jesus told Peter to go to the nations. He never told Paul. I mean, eventually he told Paul, but that was directly to Peter and the guys, But or maybe not Peter, but John, let's say, because maybe he first appeared to Peter separately and told him something different. We don't know what he told Peter individually, but it's just the same no matter which way you look at the other apostles. And but that's not even the point, really. The point of this video is Luke 4:5. So Luke 4:5 is say, and the devil, taking him up to a high mountain, showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment time. And the devil said unto him, all this power I will give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomever I give it. So the power of all the nations was going to be given to the Messiah by this entity. Well, you go to Psalm 2:8, and it says, ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen, which is the nations, for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. That's basically what the devil was saying to him. And yes, he does inherit all the nations. Jesus does rightfully inherit all the nations. And those that are in the body, in that way, kind of do, but I would say more so that they inherit their little mansions or whatever, their little dwelling place in the kingdom. And it's got enough room for some guests, so you don't have to be perfect to get in. People that got their own mansions that are saved, you could be shrewd in this world to those apostles or whatever, those people that got their own place, and they could welcome you into eternal dwellings, So Jesus encouraged people that are in the world being the cultists of Jerusalem, that, I mean, you can't make Jesus contradict the other gospels where he came just to his own people, that the mystery that Paul was received from Jesus hadn't been revealed yet. The apostles hadn't had the Spirit from on high put on into them. They haven't been breathed on yet. But y'all want to act like the apostles knew exactly what was going on. That we just need to mimic the apostles. Just because he gave Peter the keys to the kingdom does not mean Peter knew everything. But that's part of what's amazing about the New Testament, this is something that all my time in Islam I missed. This is true for the Old Testament too. If you read a plain reading of the text, we don't have to esteem the men of the Bible that much. These aren't great models for how to behave. Hardly one of them. And this is very problematic with people that use the Old Testament to sin, trying to be like the patriarchs or whatever. Well, they did it. And that's not good. But the New Testament, I wouldn't say that the characters that we love from the New Testament were these big sinners or anything. It doesn't talk about these great sins, but they were kind of blind. They were raised in these same traditions that the lying scribes had put in such a way that there was this certain veil over their eyes, and maybe the veil was intended from the jump. Maybe because of the golden calf breach, they was never intended to get it. They was intended to be separate. But that's not the point. Maybe the law was made to be so hard that they realized their golden calf breach, and then they can get into this new name and this new kingdom and everything. But until then, they're under probation. Maybe that's how it is, but that's not the point of this video. So what I'm trying to say is that when he was told that he would be given all the nation's inheritance, this is something very interesting because of John 6. And John 6 near the beginning, this is what Bible Hub will cross-reference. Mark 6 and all these other places where he goes up to the mountain, he goes out to the sea, and they think that's the significance of it. I mean, the mountain's very significant. I mean, why is this mountain in Galilee or his mountain down in Megiddo? Not Megiddo, but the Solomon's corrupt mountain or whatever, which was Olivet, that Jesus is was against Jerusalem at, but up in Galilee, like this mountain is like the Exodus, there was this mountain where the Lord was that Moses and maybe a few of his dudes could go up to, but nobody else could go down up and about. And I don't know that John 6 is that clear where they're meeting, whether these people came up the mountain halfway and he came down halfway or what have you. So I can't do a exhaustive parallel between Exodus and John 6 right now. But incidentally, this is him making his disciples, getting them to follow him, getting them to trust him. He could calm the seas and feed the people, and all these signs and everything. But it's not like the apostles understand exactly what he's saying and doing right now. He's just building their faith in him. And so when he said in John 18 that if his kingdom was of this world, that his people would go on blast or whatever, that's not because they just have a proper understanding. Because remember, Peter withdrew his sword. It's because he would have told them. He was their rabbi. He was their leader. He was the one that they were listening to. So when he was building this trust of his people, whether it was on the boat or in the mountain or whatever he was doing, making this people for himself, setting the people apart, that he was speaking in parables to them. It wasn't until halfway through his university that he even mentioned that he had to die. And this turned Judas straight up against him. That was in John. That was at the end. Judas was against him because he said this. And but he had said way back in John 6 to all these Pharisees and what have you that was around him that they'd have to eat his body and blood and all that. But That's how they wasn't trying to hear that at all. They wanted to make him king. We go John 6 right here. John 6:15. A verse I always overlook because there's one verse here and it doesn't stand out, but Don Preston pointed this out, and I think this is an incredibly powerful verse. And I would surmise that it really points back to John's understanding of Luke 4:5. That John's not going to have no wilderness trial. His wilderness is he's going to take it in stride. It's not even going to be a temptation. And the real test is him testing the people. And that test isn't going to be right then and there. The test is going to be by the time they, 70 AD roll around or whatever, that is all in, which side they on. So he's going to put little nuggets in there. He's going to, go back to the Old Testament, pull out one little pearl, and really go to town on that. And he's going to tell them certain things, show them certain things, reveal certain things in just a subtle enough way that it's going to be a matter of faith for them. That do they have faith? And that's essentially what their problem was before the golden calf breach. Here they was out of Egypt, want to go back to Egypt. I mean, what did Jeremiah 29 say? And this wasn't about the first captivity, but about the second captivity. What you do not understand, Jeremiah 29:11, I think, you do not understand the good things that I have intended for you. I mean, I look bad now. And that's when you're in the wilderness, and that's faith, but you're going to make it in the promised land. Well, that wilderness was between 30 AD and 70 AD, the 40 years, the second Exodus. So for those 40 years, these people are going to have to remember what he had told him, know that he ain't coming back until he come back, and make a choice. Are they on team Jesus or are they on team Moses? And I'm not saying Jesus contradict Moses whatsoever. What I'm trying to tell you is that Moses talked about some time in the future when there would be some other prophet. And then the prophets went on to talk about that there would be a time when all this would end and there would be a new name, a new people, a new kingdom, a new all this, Here Jesus, right after Luke 4, right in Luke 4, after he was in the wilderness, go to the synagogue. And what's the first thing he point to? Now is the time. It's happening right now. But people want to sit there and tell you, oh, we just got to wait 4, 5, 6,000 years and then it's going to happen or whatever. When he said just a little while, he said this generation. And no, I don't think there's any merit to some arguments that you could trace some lineage. And then, Jesus talked about the time when people would know. Ezekiel talked about the time when people would no longer pay for their sins of their fathers. And then Jesus came and presented that time. So, to make a long story short, do I have any more to say about this? I know I did. Ain't there nothing wrong with the 24-minute video? If I think of something else, I'll just put in my next video. How about that? All right, I guess I'm gonna bounce then. Can't remember what else I wanted to say.